Imagine you were born in 12th century France. You share the same religion, speak the same language, and have the same culture as everyone around you. You look exactly like your neighbors, yet they despise you. They want you to stay away, to live far away from the village. Perhaps by the river, where they can shun you and keep their distance. You might be asking yourself why. Why would anyone do that? Well, it's because you were born a Cagot. And if you were born a Cagot, then life wouldn't be easy for you. Like the untouchables of India, you would be shunned by society. You'd be required to wear a distinctive symbol, often a piece of red cloth in the shape of a duck's foot to mark you as different. And if you didn't wear this symbol, you'd face severe societal repercussions. You'd be forced to use separate entrances to churches and sit in designated areas away from other parishioners. This discrimination was so prevalent that to this day, some churches still have these Cagot doors and separate seating areas, serving as architectural remnants of this discrimination. So how did people tell you were a Cagot? Well, in reality, they couldn't. There were no physical or cultural traits to distinguish you from others. The only way they knew you were a Cagot was because your family was one. Your status as a Cagot was hereditary, passed down from parents to children, ensuring that the cycle of discrimination continued unbroken through generations. The Cagots were societal outcasts primarily from the western regions of France and northern Spain, including Gascony, the Basque Country, Béarn, Brittany, Aragon, Navarre, and Asturias. These areas are mostly mountainous and sparsely populated, which may have contributed to their continued isolation. The origins of the Cagots are surrounded in mystery, with various theories ranging from the outlandish to the historical. They spoke the same languages as their non-Cagot neighbors, typically French or Occitan, and practiced Roman Catholicism, with some minority adherents of Calvinism. This lack of distinct physical or cultural characteristics makes their origins even harder to determine. The Cagots are first mentioned in historical records in the early 10th century. The earliest known reference is found in the Charters of Navarre, compiled around 1070, already hinting at a stark separation between the Cagots and the rest of society. By 1288, they were referred to as Cretians or Cristianos, which translates to Christians. One possible explanation for this name lies in the medieval practice of referring to lepers as Pauperes Christi, paupers of Christ. This term was used because lepers were often seen as bearing their suffering in the likeness of Christ's passion. In the Middle Ages, the Cagots were believed to be affected by a condition resembling leprosy, such as psoriasis. This association led to a confusion between Christians and Cretans. The term Cretan, originally derived from the word Christian, was initially used to emphasize the humanity of people with disabilities. Over time, it became a derogatory term for those with physical and mental disabilities. As a result, the Cagots, despite being Christian, were derogatorily labeled and treated as lepers. Medical misconceptions about their condition reinforced their social isolation and discrimination. This lexicon reveals the deep-seated societal taboos and prejudices against the Cagots, who were often depicted in medieval texts as sharing the same unclean status as lepers, making them outcasts. In 1460, France codified discriminatory laws that entrenched the Cagots' inferior status. Despite the societal changes brought by the Renaissance and Enlightenment, the 16th and 17th centuries saw some of the harshest persecution. For instance, in 1500, Pope Leo X ordered the Cagots to be treated benevolently, but local lords ignored this decree. Similarly, in 1723, the Parliament of Bordeaux issued an edict to integrate the Cagots into society and punish discrimination against them. However, these measures were largely disregarded by the public, and the Cagots' suffering continued unabated. The 16th and 17th centuries were particularly dangerous, with laws exacerbating their marginalization. The misconception that they were lepers or had skin diseases led to their legal isolation from other communities. Efforts by higher authorities, such as the 1515 Papal Bull and the 1723 Edict from the Parliament of Bordeaux, were often thwarted by local resentment and bias. The French Revolution in the late 18th century introduced social reforms that theoretically abolished de jure discrimination against the Cagots. They were declared equal members of society, and efforts were made to integrate them. However, local biases persisted, and much of the discrimination remained. Even in the 19th century, Cagots faced significant challenges, such as finding suitable marriage partners and being denied the same rights and privileges as other citizens. Social rejection persisted despite legal equality. It was only in the early 20th century that noticeable changes began to occur. Discrimination against the Cagots in regions like the Basque Country gradually diminished. However, the Cagot label did not entirely disappear, and some descendants felt compelled to hide their ancestry. The memory of their past discrimination lingered in the collective consciousness and folklore. So why were the Cagots so oppressed? What made them so different? To this day, many hypotheses have been proposed to explain the extreme prejudice against them. These theories can be grouped into religious, racial, and socioeconomic categories. One theory suggests that the Cagots were descendants of the Cathars, a Christian sect persecuted during the Albigensian Crusade in the 13th century. According to this theory, the Cagots were cast out for heresy, and the disgrace remained with them. Another theory is that the Cagots were descendants of biblical characters cursed by God. For example, Gehazi, the servant of the prophet Elisha, was struck with leprosy. This connection to biblical curses solidified their status as untouchables. Similarly, some believe the Cagots were early Christian converts who continued to suffer persecution by pagans. Their conversion supposedly marked them as different, leading to ongoing discrimination even after others converted to Christianity. Other, more racist theories propose that the Cagots were considered ethnically different and biologically inferior. One hypothesis suggests they were descendants of the Visigoths, defeated by the Franks and ostracized as a racially inferior group. Another racial theory links the Cagots to the Saracens or Moors, viewed as racially and culturally different from Christians in France and Spain. The term Cagot itself may derive from words meaning dog and Goth, indicating a racial slur. Economic and occupational status also played a role. One theory suggests that the Cagots were once part of a respected union that lost its status due to carelessness. As their economic status declined, they were restricted to woodworking or masonry jobs. Cagots were frequently forbidden from using public wells or fountains. In some villages, they had their own separate water sources, often of poorer quality. Beyond woodworking and masonry, Cagots were often restricted to certain trades perceived as less desirable. They were sometimes forbidden from handling food or participating in occupations that involved direct contact with non-Cagots. Additionally, Cagots were often barred from receiving medical care or had to use separate facilities. Denied access to common healthcare resources, the Cagots had to rely on their own community for medical needs, which often led to inadequate care. Another theory proposes that the Cagots were skilled woodworkers who faced commercial competition. This rivalry led to their sidelining and social ostracism, as they were deemed a lower class unfit for socializing with the upper class. Local legends and myths also contributed to the discrimination against the Cagots. Rumors circulated that they had webbed hands or feet, smelled bad, or had other animal-like traits. These myths dehumanized them. Despite numerous theories, historians have yet to reach a clear understanding of the reasons behind the Cagots' persecution. Limited historical records and pervasive prejudices rooted in superstition and false assumptions complicate the picture. Conflicting historical evidence, such as varying descriptions of the Cagots' appearance, further muddles the issue. Some sources describe them as dark and swarthy, while others depict them as white and fair, indicating that these physical features were likely exaggerated or fabricated. The origin of the term Cagot itself is controversial, with theories suggesting it was a racial slur, an occupational name, or a nickname. The lack of consensus highlights the confusion surrounding their past. Socioeconomic theories offer reasonable explanations for the prejudice against the Cagots, but don't fully account for the degree and longevity of their discrimination. The idea of a fallen union of carpenters does not explain why other tradesmen in different regions were not similarly discriminated against. The regional variation in the treatment of Cagots suggests that local culture played a significant role. Some areas adopted strict segregation measures, while others were relatively liberal, allowing some degree of integration. The Cagots themselves left few written records, relying on oral culture. As a result, much of what is known about them comes from biased external sources, making it difficult to develop a coherent and accurate history. The lack of definite information about the Cagots' discrimination underscores the complexities of history. The existence of multiple, often contradictory narratives highlights the challenge of separating myth from reality. The uncertainty surrounding their story is a fitting reminder of the importance of critically examining historical sources. Despite being outcasts, the Cagots had a significant impact on the cultures and societies that surrounded them. One of their most notable contributions was in craftsmanship, particularly in wood carving. The Cagots were skilled artisans in carpentry, masonry, and woodworking. Their expertise is evident in many churches, houses, and public structures in southwestern France and northern Spain. Their specialization in woodworking and construction influenced the architectural design of these regions. But as we're used to by now, it wasn't all rosy. One of the primary reasons why Cagots were such skilled woodcarvers and carpenters is because this was often the only jobs they were allowed to work. Some of the most intricate examples of their wood carvings are found in the churches of Béarn and the Basque Country, which demonstrate their high level of skill and artistic sensibility. These carvings often included detailed ornamental designs that became part of the broader folk art of these areas. While specific examples of their contributions are not extensively documented, the enduring presence of their craftsmanship in these regions' architecture speaks volumes about their influence. There were also some notable individuals relevant to the history and culture of Cagots. One such individual is Xavier Sansotena, a Basque sculptor and ethnographic activist with Cagot ancestry. Sansotena has written several novels to tell the story of the Cagots, and founded the Museo Etnográfico de los Cagotes in Bozade, Navarre, Spain. His art and sculptures convey messages of exclusion and resilience experienced by the Cagots. Another important figure is Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a 17th century French statesman, who, despite not being a Cagot himself, advocated for the rights of the Cagots and other oppressed groups. Colbert's policies aimed at integrating marginalized groups into the social and economic structure of France. Elizabeth Gaskell, a Victorian-era writer, also brought attention to the Cagots through her book An Accursed Race. Though not a Cagot herself, her detailed account of their plight raised awareness at an international level. These individuals, whether of Cagot descent or not, have ensured that the struggles and history of this disregarded group are well documented and remembered. Their efforts highlight the importance of acknowledging and preserving the histories of marginalized communities, ensuring that their contributions and experiences are not forgotten. The story of the Cagots is a stark reminder of the ongoing struggles faced by discriminated and excluded minorities today. Just as the Cagots experienced centuries of prejudice and injustice, many people today continue to suffer from similar forms of discrimination, which perpetuates cycles of inequality. The persecution of the Cagots shares similarities with the experiences of other marginalized groups throughout history. For instance, the Romani people and Jews in medieval Europe faced similar hardships, social exclusion, and legal restrictions. These parallels highlight a common tendency in human societies to ostracize those who are perceived as different. Understanding the plight of the Cagots in this broader context can shed light on the mechanisms of social exclusion and the enduring need to combat prejudice. The oppression of minorities in the past, not just Cagots but many others, serves as an important lesson. It reminds us that prejudice and discrimination based on myths and unfounded beliefs can devastate generations of families. This awareness brings home the reality that social injustice is an ongoing process. It is essential to fight for the rights of all individuals to ensure that no one is deprived of equal rights and opportunities. In recent years, there's been a growing recognition of the Cagots' history. Some regions have started to acknowledge their past mistreatment, with memorials and historical markers being erected to educate the public about their plight. Of course, none of that can make up for centuries of senseless persecution and discrimination Cagots had to endure for no apparent reason. The story of the Cagots is one of incredible strength and resilience in the face of constant oppression. Their history is a tale of survival for a people who endured social rejection, a memory preserved in literature, music, and art as a testament to human spirit against oppression. Despite their lowly status, the Cagots did not give up the fight against prejudice and inequality. They made numerous attempts to change their fate, but remained one of the most oppressed groups in European history, illustrating the difficulty of overcoming social stigma. As we learn about the Cagots, we must ask ourselves, how would we feel if we were treated as outcasts for reasons beyond our control? How can we ensure that our society does not repeat the mistakes of the past? The story of the Cagots is not just a historical curiosity. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of empathy, justice, and the continuous fight against all forms of discrimination.